Hi everyone. So today we are going to talk a lot about line quality and some of the aspects of drafting as we start to dive into our second week of class. So let's go ahead and get to the PowerPoint, shall we? Here we go. So the design graphics, this is our week 2, and let's get started. We are going to talk a little bit about some of these vocabulary, line types, line weight, line quality, consistency. We're going to talk about extension lines, line anchors. These are some of the things that I touched base on last week when I was doing my line demo. And I'm going to verify this a little bit more and clarify some things. We're also going to talk about architectural lettering, the different types, lettering strokes, and so forth. So basically, this is what we're going to kind of go over today. So remember that lines mean everything. They all have a purpose. So we are going to dive right into learning about lines. So our outcomes for this week are to develop understanding of line drawings as pertain to design graphics, to develop an understanding of line types and line weights, and to develop an understanding of architectural lettering, methods of achieving these outcomes that represent related assignments. So what you will be seeing this week is 2 assignments. We're going to be doing more line weights and different line types, and you also will be working on architectural lettering. So everything I'm talking about today, we're going to do in our assignments that I'll go over in the demos. So basically, that's what we're kind of aiming for. Here we want to talk a little bit about line drawings. Basically, line drawings are essential. They're the component of all drawings. This is why the line is why we want to master our quality of it and what it represents. We talked a little bit about the demo last week regarding how to hold your pencil, making sure that your position is correct and that your movement is fluid when you stop and you start. So we had discussed a little bit about making that nice, clean sweep across the page when you're using your horizontal bar. I also touched base a little bit about creating vertical lines. We start from the bottom up, and we always go from left to right. We don't want to smear our lines in our our graphite and lead. So there is a technique, and in the book it kind of goes into this, so make sure you're reading your chapters, and I will continue to show this on the demonstrations. But you don't want to hold that pencil so tight that it actually creates a crease in your paper. You want just the right pressure to draw a nice clean line that's consistent. Consistency is definitely the key to this. So really just taking those knuckles and getting them very cramped and holding the pencil too close and tight, this is not a good way to produce a good line quality. And making it a little bit looser and arched and just a little bit further away, this is going to help you with a little bit more line control and able to not make an indentation in your paper. So we do want to make sure that we also start and stop. We don't start, stop, start, stop. That will make your lines inconsistent. So we experience the line fully. You have to think about it, look and see it. Consider the tactile aspect of the line. Review, recall, evaluate it. Consider the next line. So you're always drawing with the idea of the entire picture in mind. So you're drawing to an end. You start somewhere and you end somewhere. You're always looking ahead as you draw. Drafting is something that once you're blocking out your drawings, you're always wanting to create a very fluid drawing. So it's not sketchy and it's very technical. So we want to create the crisp, purposeful lines when we draw. And it takes a little practice. Also, line quality can also be hindered by the backing of your board. So in the equipment list, If you use some kind of vinyl backing, it does make the line quality a little bit more forgiving. And we had that viscose backing. That is an option. It's like when you write on a table and you don't have another piece of paper underneath, it is not quite as clean as if you have a little cushion under there. So when you're drafting, a lot of times on our drafting board, they will add that vinyl protector. That does help with the line quality. Also, a nice the pencil softness makes a little bit easier and darker. So those are some elements that also affect your line quality. And now we want to talk a little bit about different types of lines. There are different types of lines we're going to explore, and I'm going to have you actually draft these in our next lesson. These are the main lines that we use. We use solid lines. They mainly are the majority of lines that we use. We use dash lines, center lines, grid lines, property lines, break lines, and utility lines. Now, property lines and utility lines are often a little more for civil engineer drawings or for exterior, not as much for interior. But you will see these quite often throughout working drawings, and you really need to be able to identify them. We want to make sure that you're able to read these architectural drawings so that you can understand and interpret them correctly for your client and for the project. So these are the main lines that we will be dealing with. Now we want to talk about the lines here. So lines, they represent characteristics and conditions as drawn things. So a line is a thing, right? Something we draw. You have now kind of ventured into creating solid lines. So the thickness of the line right here is the weight. And then you also have thick and thin, and then you also have light and dark lines. So there's two components: the weight of a line, how thick it is, and how light and dark it is. So we have two different components: the thickness or thinness and the lightness and darkness. And so there are certain times when you may need a nice thick dark line, or you might need a very light thin line, or you might need a light thin, you might need a dark thin line. So it just depends on what you're trying to communicate. So as we go and learn more about drawings, we'll also understand what part of a drawing needs what type of line. And there seems to be, it's an overall general rule of thumb that you'll find consistent in all hand drafting, and you're going to carry this information into computer aided drafting, where we have different line weights as well, and lightnesses and darknesses of lines. So that is a solid line. The dash lines have consistent little dashes here. Here they have a very small dash, here more of a medium, here a larger dash. So you'll see these in certain parts of drawings that I will point out. Often a dash line will have will show something that's hidden underneath. So as we go further, I'll show you where dash lines are applied in a drawing. But they basically are little choppy, they have little pieces of chopped line, but they are perfectly spaced in between. And then a center line has a long line, a small dash, a long line, a small dash, a long line, and a small dash. That is a center line. We will be using center lines in some of our drawings. We're going to practice that shortly when we go to our next assignment. And so you'll get familiar with and comfortable with drawing these lines. And that's what I want you to do, is just get comfortable with the pencil and the instrument. The more you practice, the more it will become second nature to you. So we want to make sure that we get used to that. Now there are also grid lines. There are times that we may use where you become almost like a graph paper. We use grids to lay out certain drawings. A property line is similar to a center line, but it has a long line with two little dashes, then a long line. That may be used to indicate the property or an easement on the exterior in architectural drawings and so forth. Now, a break line will often have a line with a little jag in it, almost like a heartbeat, like a little Z in there. And that is showing that there's a break and it continues. Now, utility lines we don't use much, but they will have various little letters that represent what they are. This is an S or a W, so that would maybe be the sewage line. This would be the water line. This would be the ground electrical line with a G. So utility lines will often use little letters to represent what type of utility they are. Now, line weights, and this is what we really want to talk about. Line weight, the concept of line weights, the practical graphics and what they represent. Line weights tend to express prominent parts of architectural features. So if an architectural feature is very prominent, the line weight will be darker. If the feature is less prominent, you'll see the line weights get lighter and lighter. Also, as things appear from further away to closer, you'll see the line weights change. Line weights. So this is a skill set that you really need to adapt, and it really will help you to have an understanding and define your drawing. And we use them in media. It definitely is a motor skill when you are working with your pencil, the eye-hand coordination, and learning to have an anchor. An anchor line is where it stops and it starts and stops. So your anchor line often will be a line that is the basis of your drawing, and you have a beginning and an end. So that's what we call an anchor line. All drawings start with an anchor line. So there's a starting and a finishing point. And that's something that we will investigate. Now, here are different line weights. Remember, I talked about that line weight. So here's a heavy line weight, and yet these are different. They're both different thicknesses, but darker. Here you'll have something more medium. And these show the various thicknesses of your mechanical pencil. Those will affect your heaviness, your line weights. So it really has to do with the thickness and thinness of your line. The light line weights are very thin. Usually we have a smaller pencil, and we often will use like a very light line weight, will also be very light in color as well. And we are using extremely hard leads to create a very light line weight. So we're dealing with thicknesses and darknesses and lightnesses. So we have heavy, medium, light, and very light. This is when we say, what kind of line weight do you want? Oh, I need a very light line weight. Well, that would probably be needed to block out drawings. A heavy line weight would mean that you are probably using that to outline something that's structural. So we'll get into that a little more in depth as we look at drawings and analyze each line weight. But just know there are 4 types of line weight: heavy, medium, light, and very light. Line quality, so density, so the coverage of the width and the consistency and uniformity. This is where we want to create uniformity. We want our line to be fluid and not go thinner than thicker than thinner than thicker. This is going to take some practice. And this is where you really want to learn how to hold the pencil correctly. And it's kind of hard not being there, but practice makes perfect. So continue to use your horizontal edge and try to create the most consistent lines possible, creating a nice fluent look. Right here it says ethereal lines should be uniformly dense for ease and readability and reproduction. That means that when we copy it off, I could see that crisp line. Line weight is therefore primarily a matter of width and thickness. While inked lines are uniformly black and vary only in width, pencil lines can vary in both width and tonal value depending on the hardness of the lead used. So like I said, they can be light, meaning the tone, lighter in color or darker in color. And so that's where we have two elements going for us: the thickness of the line and the darkness and lightness of the line. So we want to, so the use of leads will create that. The tooth and density of the surface. So like I said, the back of your board may change the line quality. And the speed and the pressure in which you draw. So strive to make all pencil lines uniformly dense and vary their width to achieve different line weights. So you've got things going on for you. The backing of your board, you have the pencil itself, the line weight, the hardness and softness of your leads. So all of these little teeny things are going to create a different line, and even the pressure that you use. So get used to using a nice, just a nice medium pressure, and you'll have a more fluid line quality. So we want to make sure we get that. Oops, I got to get the camera onto that slide. Okay, so line quality, density. Confident. So you have to really commit and really practice it, and just make sure that you are being consistent. Here, you'll see kind of some inconsistencies. Here, this is what we call a fade line. So line quality refers to the crispness and clarity and consistency. So if I say, watch your line quality when I'm grading, that's what I'm looking for: consistency and crispness and clarity. The density and weight of the line should be as uniform as possible along the entire length. Now, you drafted lines should have a taut quality as if stretched slightly between 2 points. So it's almost like you're pulling a line. So you want it to have a nice lengthy look. Avoid drawing a line as a series of short overlapping strokes. So here it goes thin, and then they kind of stopped, and then it kind of gets dark here. So we want to avoid this. We want something a little bit more consistent. So when we talk about multiple lines, this is when you're connecting objects and so forth, and you're enclosing a shape. We want to make sure that there's a perfect ending. Back in the days, in the architectural days, we used to cross over our lines. It was kind of a style. But now in this class, we want to make sure that we really have a beginning and an end. There is a crispness and a purpose to each line that encloses a shape. So all lines should meet crisply in the corner here. When lines stop short of a corner, the resulting angle will appear to be soft and round. So when you're not quite, fully committing it, it has problems. You also want to remember, when you start to create objects in computer drafting, if you don't close a line, it's going to cause a problem in the future. You need to make sure you are snapping those ends and closing each line. That's why we want to practice it on paper, so this will transfer, this concept will transfer into the computer drafting. So making sure that you are very, very crisp and making sure you're connecting all the dots, leaving no gaps in your form. Okay, so we definitely want to make sure that we are. So here they're kind of talking about extension lines. See right here when they're overlapping right here, avoid excess overlapping that appears out of proportion in the sizes. So we want to make sure that we're not kind of overlapping our lines, but that they meet perfectly. Now broken lines, similar rule to solid lines, they want uniformity. You don't want a broken line that's like 1/4 of an inch and then like an 1/8 inch and then 1/2 inch. You want consistent dash marks that are perfect, and that creates a little consistency. So there's just a slight gap, but you want to be consistent when creating your broken or dashed lines. Super important. Do's of drawing. choose the correct leads, soft versus hard leads. You know, you want to make sure that what you're trying to achieve, you have the right lead. Nothing is more frustrating trying to create a very dark, nice thick line with a very hard lead. You will be frustrated. You want to, you want to worry about the quality requirements of your drawing and the medium you're using, the materials. So make sure you're using the correct materials. You're using your correct lead hardnesses. Draw with even consistency, speed, have a very steady pace with even pressure. So those are the key elements you want. Do's of drawing continue. Avoid feathering or drawing over drawn lines. Observe or monitor lead points. I'd like to, and this helps with consistency, you roll or rotate a point, anchor line endpoints from one point to the other. So basically what it's saying is, I kind of touch this, as you're drawing and you're making a nice consistent line, you actually are slightly rotating the pin. That keeps the actual lead thickness the exact same thickness. Even a small lead like that can actually get worn down and get a little thin, like when you're in pencil, you're doing a pencil. So when you kind of roll it, it actually really helps. I hope you just practice these techniques. We can't do it in person, but just whatever works to get that most consistent line, that's what we're looking for. And you want to make sure you're continually cleaning your workspace. So you want to make sure that you are using your brush. If you're erasing, you are using this brush to get rid of the lead and the erase crumbles. Why we want to keep it consistent is because when you allow a lot of lead to the granules to get on there, it starts to smear your drawing, and you don't want to do that. So you want to consistently be slightly, brushing off your drawing as you need to. Oops. Let's go forward. Now we also want to make sure that we don't draw dirty. In other words, making sure your hands are clean, your board is clean. Don't have a lot of oily skin lotions. You'll find that will actually stain your vellum. So avoid just a lot of oils, perfumey things on your hands. Even be careful of the hand sanitizers too. Make sure that your hands are fully dry. This will help avoid smearing of the graphite, the lead. Don't push the pencils or pens. You don't push them forward, you pull them slightly. You kind of drag them from like left to right. Don't draw to tools, equipment, ends or beyond. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you stay within your picture plane. You go from one endpoint to the other. So you want to make sure, you've got a very clean surface to start with. Don't sabotage your drawing by having dirty hands or things on them, or a dirty drafting table. So cleanliness is extremely important. The vertical lines, this is important too, and it's going to seem unnatural to you, but when we use our triangle, we position it this way. We draw from the bottom up. We drag the pencil up, and then we continue to slide across the paper from left to right. We don't drag from right to left because we don't want to smear our drawings. So it's really important. I will demonstrate that. But it's an interesting way to draft. So as you're drafting with the triangle and you're going from top to bottom, you continue to draft this way. You start here, you pull the next line. If you did it the opposite, then you would, if you did it the opposite this way and then you smeared it and did another one and you smeared it, you see, you don't want to drag your triangle across your lead. It will start to smear it. Sometimes what I do is I'll actually tape a little penny on each corner, so my triangle just sets up a little bit above my paper so it doesn't drag or cause any of the graphite or lead to smear. So once again, you start from bottom up and then you continue to go to a cleaner surface. You don't drag across your lines. Very important. So we want to make sure. that you know that. Now, experiment with drafting triangles. We're requiring that you get two type of drafting triangles. One is a 30-60 and the other is a 45. So that's what those look like, and I'm going to show you right now. These two are going to suffice us. We want to make sure that we have a perfect 45. It's very equal. And then the 60, 30 is very long and thin, okay? So this is a 60 angle, and this is a 30 angle. This is a 45 degree, and this is a 90. So you want a 45 and a 60, 30 triangle, okay? And you also might want to try to experiment with some of your triangles just to kind of play around and see how you can get different angles. They're kind of recommending you just try. This is best done with a what I call an adjusting triangle. And the adjusting triangle is fantastic. It gives you all different kinds of various angles, and that is a super help. So an adjusting triangle does this. This allows you to adjust to any angle that you want, and it shows the angles right here. So this is really handy. It's almost like the only tool you need, but you have to be careful that they don't kind of come up. But it's very handy. I've had this for 20, 30 years, and I'll tell you, it's a great investment. So it can create any angle you want. This is called an adjusting triangle. And that's a lot of fun too. You never have to worry about not getting the right angle on your drawing with one of those adjusting triangles. So, just experiment with your triangles, and, we're going to play with them and just kind of learn how to master them and what they represent, the degrees that they represent. So I will definitely get into that a little bit more when we start to draft. Graphic symbols. We are going to do a little assignment showing some of these symbols and their relevancy. But what they do is they assist the viewer, and they give us clues. They give us reference information. So all of these graphic symbols that I'm going to show you and we're going to use and do in our next assignment are all for a purpose. And they all have different characteristics that we will go over. So they may tell you what side of a building you're looking at. They may give you what we call reference drawings, the information. They tell you very relevant things like a call out, item call out, and things like that. They all have various consistencies and standards that we use throughout all of our architectural drawings. So you'll see them over and over again. We have a north arrow, we have elevation marks. There's all of these little symbols, graphic symbols, that we will teach you and what they represent. And we will go over several of them in our next assignment. So I'm excited to start drafting those. We often use a lot of our templates to draft those graphics. And you guys are required to get this little template. It's just a general purpose template. This is what we use most of our graphic symbols with. We use a lot of hexagons. We may use circles and the squares for finish callouts, some for item callouts, north arrow. There's various different templates here that will represent our graphics that we're going to use, our little graphic symbols. So we will talk a little bit and get into those in detail as we finish through those. It's not one. Go next slide. There you are. So some of the graphic symbols look like this: the north arrow. Every single plane drawing, what we have is a plan drawing has a north arrow, and each north arrows are stylized, but they're standard on all drawings. And north arrows help to tell the orientation of the drawing itself. So where north is. And this is extremely important, and I will require it on all of our floor plans and reflective ceiling plans. Now there's another kind of graphic, it's called a graphic scale. This is a certain kind of little graph, and this is something you might find on maps. It's represented. So as if you shrink it down or make it bigger according to the drawing, it doesn't really represent a scale, it just represents a size. So if they say that this size is a mile on a map, if you shrink the map in half, then whatever that size is equals a mile. So it's very representational. It's a little different. But this is called a graphic scale. It's different than a regular scale. Now we have our little section lines. These are things we use where we create little indications of direction in our section lines. And we're going to do these and use these for when we do our building section. So these are just some of the little symbols we use that I'll go over, but they're very standard in the industry. Although they might change in style, they are something that's required in most drawings. So we'll go over those. And we really want you to know how to read them. Now, lettering is something that we're doing also. So in this next segment of our assignments, we're going to work on lettering, line types, different ones, and our graphic symbols. But lettering is so key to making your drawing look professional. And the purpose of the lettering helps to label things. We want it to be legible. And you have to really use the appropriate letter style. Now here, these are our stencils. We're not going to use stencils in this class, okay? We are going to learn what's called architectural lettering. Now in AutoCAD, in computers nowadays, they use a lot of Helvetica, maybe Times. They also use Arc Chisel, which looks more like architectural lettering. So these might be some of the readable, more recognizable fonts that they use in computer drafting. However, we are going to learn the skill of architectural lettering and how to create that. So you want to make sure that you are not mixing your uppercase and lowercase. So when we do architectural drawings, the majority of our drawings are all capitals, and that's what you'll be using when you label things. I'm going to teach you and show you how to do architectural lettering. Extremely important skill set. In fact, a lot of drawings and portfolios are rejected just because the person did not take time and care to make their architectural lettering look amazing. Old school architects pride themselves in their stylized architectural lettering. This is a skill you can learn. We are going to practice it a lot, and I am looking forward to seeing how your architectural lettering is going to improve. It's really quite fun once you get the hang of it and you learn how to utilize the lettering. So, there's different things, the different sizes, and the viewing point of how we use architectural lettering. Here, they don't want you to mix upper and lowercase when you start writing, but and when you use your text, what is the title versus the text, the sizing, and so forth. So titles are always larger, subtitles, and so forth. So we will be, using some of these lettering rules in our drawings, and we will be mixing some of these applications so that you can see the different types of lettering we use. Some of the other little areas of lettering are, once again, lowercase lettering is particularly appropriate for just the body of the text, but when we do our drawings, we don't usually use lowercase. So I don't want to confuse you, but this is, but what we're looking for when we start to do our lettering is correct spacing. And this is something that's going to take a little time. So like I said, when we start to do our lettering, which won't look like this, but we don't want to have like too much gaps in between. We want to make sure things are even, and we want to make sure that we are creating a nice consistent look when we do our lettering. So what we're looking for, that I'll be showing you, is lettering more looking like this. I will be teaching you how to do the broad lettering and more the narrow. We're going to practice these two. You will find your own style as you start to develop your lettering style. And most architectural lettering is somewhere in between these. So we're going to practice this type of lettering. And believe it or not, you're going to be able to really learn how to hand letter this nice. It is not that difficult, but this is extremely, extremely important on your drawings. So we will be using this. We use often guidelines with our letter guide, this little tool that I was telling you about. This helps us to do guidelines. These are light lines that we would use that gives us even spaces for our lettering. And I'll show you how we'll use that when we start to practice. But this is a guideline little tool, couple bucks, and you need to get one of these. These will be very helpful when we start to architecturally letter. And we'll talk, mainly most of the lettering is in 3/16 of an inch. So we're going to practice an entire set of lettering in that height. That's the standard height. And this is kind of what your lettering is going to look like right here. Use of drafting tools. Like we said, I will kind of go over some of the triangles, how to use a lettering guide. We are going to look how to do hand lettering, hand printing, drawn letters. We're going to talk about the consistency, having consistency in your lettering. And once again, what I always say is practice makes perfect. Now, I don't know why they put this in the slide, but this is not what we are doing. This looks more like a stencil. You will not be using stencils in this course. But the good news is that this part is over. So what I really want to just overview is there's different types of lines. We have solid, we have center lines, dashed lines, they have property lines, utility lines, various types of line types. Broken lines, we're going to go over and we're going to do a project on that. There are different symbols. We are going to do a project on that. Elevation marks, the north arrow, different graphs, just various types of graphic symbols that you're going to learn. And then next we're going to really invest some time into mastering our architectural lettering. So you got a little taste of learning how to draw a solid line, dealing with line weights and lightness and darkness. And we've kind of mastered the scale. We're going to work a little more on scale. You're always going to be using your scale. But now we want to go and take that line and create lettering, symbols, and different other types of lines. So thank you. Talk to you soon.